Hey guys, welcome to the Empower Homes channel. This is Juan Jaramillo with team lead with Empower Homes. I've had the pleasure of serving over 100 people in the buying or selling process in the last 3 years. And today we want to talk about, or I want to talk about, the buyer agency agreement. Now, check with your broker because this specifically is tailored to Greenville GGAR contracts, but it's probably similar with Spartanburg and Anderson. I'm guessing probably the same thing, and it's probably going to be very similar to wherever you're from. But definitely check with your broker before you just kind of take this advice. Again, I'm not an attorney though. Not again. I haven't said that yet, but I'm not an attorney though. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. This is just based off experience, based off conversations I've had with attorneys or other extremely experienced real estate agents, and how I explain the buyer agency agreement every time to my clients, specifically my buyers. So let's get started. What is what is the point of a buyer agency agreement? It protects your time and effort. It establishes clear expectations, which is extremely important in our business. It's a legal protection for us and demonstrates that you take your business seriously. Now, I used to do showings but without asking people to sign the agency. I actually used to do as many showings as people wanted, and I wouldn't ask for the agency until we submitted an offer. Wow, was that a costly mistake? So let's call it tuition. The reason why is, I mean, how many times do you show a home, especially when you're around the price range of new construction, and then they ghost you all of a sudden? 6 months later, they reappear and say, "Hey, I bought a home." Oh, really? What kind of home? A new construction. Went to the sales rep and then went from there, right? So you just kind of wasted your whole time. Now, part of it is you didn't give enough value, which is a whole different video, right? Enough value for them to want to stick with you. But the other part is they didn't sign your agency agreement, so there was nothing serious about it, right? They a lot of the times. We train our agents to ask, "Oh, you're talking with an agent? Have you signed with that agent? Do you feel committed with that agent?" Right? If you haven't signed with that agent, it's all at least over here where we're at. It's free game. It really depends on the buyer or the client or the customer at that point. And so we want to make sure that yes, they have signed with us, that they are our client, and now you're protected. And hopefully, other agents most of the time will respect that. Okay, appointment of broker. This section of the part is like the first page of the contract, and actually, it wouldn't be a bad idea if you go ahead and have the ERTB. That's what we call it, the agency, the buyer's agency agreement, next to you, going through it with us. And if you're ever filling it out, feel free to review this video real quick. I'll try to make the video as quick as possible. So this is the top part. This contract makes you the buyer's exclusive agent. Go ahead and put the buyer's name, and whoever's going to be on title is who you want to put up here. Buyer agrees to negotiate only through you. All property inquiries go through you, protects your role, and ensures commitment, right? So make sure everybody that's going to be on the title is who signs this buyer agency agreement. All right, next one, purpose of agency. It defines the type of property the buyer wants, covers price range, location, adjustments, and whatnot. Let me back up real quick. This part is pretty ambiguous. This is the part in the page one where it kind of asks you, price range, location, key features. This part is pretty ambiguous. I guess the only nuance here though that you definitely want to know is if you have an investor that only wants you to represent them in one particular property, you can put the address here and also put the address in the amendment to make sure that essentially you're only going to represent them in this particular property so that they would even sign an ERTB to begin with. And ERTB, just so we're clear, stands for exclusive right to buy buyer agency agreement. So that's you'll hear me refer back to that ERTB constantly. All right, broker duties. What are we responsible for? You represent only the buyer unless dual agency applies. You help them find and negotiate the home purchase. You cannot say your services are free, especially nowadays with the whole lawsuit that happened about a year ago now, 6 months ago. And unless there are no fees, unless you're not charging the 3% specifically. If you are going to charge the 3%, even if the seller is going to pay for it, your services are not free. All it means is somebody else is paying. And confidentiality applies even after the contract ends. Please keep that in mind. Now, the buyers also have responsibilities, and I actually go through this with the buyers. Buyer works only with you, no other agent. They need to understand that. They provide accurate financial advice or information, I should say. And the reason why is we do make certain determinations or advice. We do give certain advice depending on that information. They must refer all inquiries to us, and they must be available for showings and discussions. I mean, that's not usually a big deal. All right, compensation of broker. There's really three different ways, and please explain it to our clients that there are three different ways that we can get paid for. One is by the seller. Usually 9 out of 10 times the seller will pay for it. Now it's I'd say it's still 9 out of 10 times, 8 out of 10 times. Sometimes from the buyer, the seller's not paying for the commission. The buyer will then be responsible for the commission, and sometimes both. Right? Let's say 1.5, 1.5, or 2%, and you're charging 3%. Then both of the buyer and the seller would be part of your commissions. And so keep that in mind. Let the client know or the customer know, and more importantly, let them know that they'll know far in advance what the situation is going to be, depending on what house it is, right? And your commission is negotiable. If the buyer defaults, you may still be owed. So this depends on really how you fill out the ERTB. I don't fill it out like this. So if the closing doesn't go through and it is the buyer's fault, I don't hold the buyers responsible. It just depends on you and how you want to fill out the ERTB and what you agree to with the buyers. Some firms charge an admin fee. This is true. Please let them know about it up front. Sometimes it's like a TC fee, like 350. I've seen it as high as $650. It's really up to you guys and what the buyer agrees to, but whatever it might be, let them know up front, and they will have to sign off on it. All right, term of agency defines how long you represent them. Usually it's 6 months. Sometimes it can be as little as 3 or really a month. Depends on the situation, but this is where you put how long the agreement is, right? And also, if the home closes within this time period, then you get paid. So keep that in mind. So you may, if things get pushed back, you may have to extend it, which isn't usually a big deal. But you want to make sure you know when that expires and have an idea to make sure that the ERTB is within the closing period, 100%. So definitely double check on that. Dual agency designation. So dual agency, you represent both the buyer and the seller. This happens occasionally. Be careful with this. Make sure that they are very aware of it and they feel comfortable with it. Don't push them to it, because neither of them essentially get representation. You're just now kind of facilitating the transaction, but you're not representing anybody at that point, because you know everything that the seller's willing to do to get this to closing, and everything the buyer's willing to offer to get this to closing. So can't really do a great job. Designated agencies, some firms, same firm, but another agent represents them. So usually what I do specific personally is, if it's a dual agency situation and both people still want representation, I usually step away from that deal and I get two other people within the same agency or within the same brokerage to represent each party to make sure that both of them have 100% representation. Buyer must agree in writing. Yeah, that's what that was saying. Other potential buyers. Your firm may have other buyers looking at the same home. I thought this part was interesting, kind of when I was reviewing over the ERTB, because this is extremely rare and it's almost happened to me, but it's never actually happened to me before. But it's actually a really good idea to go ahead and explain it to your clients. Is essentially, if you have two buyers, what do you do if they want to buy the same home, right? You must keep your buyer information confidential. You can't let them know who each other are. And you cannot favor one buyer over another. I think that's super key. So you got to keep that in mind. You can still represent each one and really tailor the advice to their needs specifically. But you can't say, "Hey, my other client is going to offer 150. You should offer 155," or vice versa, right? So you have to be very careful to your advice. And I would really lean on good questions around that. Maybe a couple good questions to ask here is, and I ask this question all the time with multiple offer situation is, what's the highest that you're willing to offer, and that if you win the home, you don't regret overpaying for the home, but if you lose the home, you don't regret paying offering too little. Whatever that number is what you should offer. And it's a very it depends question, right? But it's a very personal question. And I think it's a great question to ask clients, especially in multiple offer situations that really want the home, because you don't want to give them the advice to pay 20K, 30K over asking. If they really don't love the home, they win the home, they come back to you and say, hey, I think the other buyers actually paid 10K over asking, not 20K. You just made me spend 10K more than what I should have, right? And that can just become a real nasty situation real quick. So, you know, the advice should be based on the CMA and then ask that question. Okay, I can't pronounce that word, of broker. What does that mean exactly? That just means they have to let you know if they're working with another agent, and it protects you from commission disputes. This can happen fairly rarely, but important to explain. Buyer covers costs if they cause any legal issues. Keep that in mind. Confidentiality. Buyer's identity may be disclosed. Sellers may not keep offers confidential, so keep that in mind. Um, be very, especially when it's more like, let's say, famous people or people that kind of want to keep their identity low key. This part might get a little bit more complicated, and definitely talk to an attorney here. The little I know about situations like that is sometimes they'll buy a home through an agent of the LLC, which usually is their attorneys. But I'm no professional in that aspect of it. But just know that buyer's identity will most likely be disclosed when you submit an offer. So keep that in mind. All right. Privacy rules do apply unless the law requires otherwise. Non discrimination policy, fair housing rules apply to us. So be careful with that. And then covers race, gender, religion, disability, and so on and so forth. So even if your clients and if you're in the business long enough, you'll have customers that are not the greatest people, morally speaking, and so you really want to, like, you may have somebody say, hey, I don't want to live in these kind of neighborhoods versus those kind of neighborhoods, and it's based on race. You can't you can't advise them saying, hey, yeah, this neighborhood tends to be this and this neighborhood tends to be this. Just stay away from that conversation altogether. There's an argument to be made that you might, should probably fire your client there at that point, or maybe not proceed to represent them, or ask them to become a client. But if you continue to work with them, no harm, no foul, might be family or whatever. Just be careful with the advice that you give on the situation. You don't want to cross certain lines, and maybe you don't want to offend either. So just keep in mind, we are not allowed to discriminate based on these protected classes, and you shouldn't either way, even if you were allowed to. Professional counsel. That's a hard word for me to pronounce. Keep in mind, you're not a lawyer, you're not an inspector, you're not a lender, you're not a tax expert. A lot of clients will ask you for that kind of advice. So make sure you have a Rolodex, or for those who don't know what a Rolodex are, because I actually learned about that maybe a couple years ago, because I'm not that old. It Make sure you have a list of vendors that are lawyers, that are inspectors, that are lenders, or that are a tax expert, so that you can essentially just send them over to them. Or if you really want to have a really good, let's say, service, reach out to them on their behalf, on your client's behalf, for those questions, and then get them kind of contacted together, right? But you don't want to be the one that gives that kind of professional advice. You just, push them towards that way. All right. Mediation clause. Disputes go to mediation first, not to court. And essentially, the idea is it saves us all money and time for both parties. So just know that if anything goes to a lawsuit, go to a mediator first. And I explain that to my clients. Criminal and sex offender. Usually, the way I go about this is, hey, I'm not allowed to tell you where the sex offenders are, but I can let you know where to find that list. And it's usually in a government website. Just let them know, hey, any kind of sex offenders, or really what am I looking for? Crime rates, crime statistics. Some people, some families would like to see that. You can't tell them about it, but you can tell them where to find that information. So keep that in mind. Let them know that you're not able to do that. Binding agreement. So this contract is final unless you decide to put something in writing to add to the contract, and that everybody has signed it. Wow, that was a weird way to say that. I felt very robotic there. But we'll keep this in, and yeah, you guys kind of get the point of what binding agreement is. Yeah, the ERTB is pretty brutal. I hope this isn't too boring to watch, and I hope this has been good value for you guys. Contingencies. Contingencies can be interesting. I've never actually had a contingency in an ERTB, right? But the way I was thinking about it when I was typing this up is I guess you could create a contingency if your clients really want to. Is, hey, if you get my home sold, then this contingency or this ERTB is valid. But if my home doesn't sell, then this ERTB is not valid, right? I'm assuming that that could happen. I've never had a contingency on an ERTB, but yeah, I mean that is definitely a possibility. You can create a contingency on ERTBs, so it could be interesting. Electronic signature is pretty self-explanatory. We can sign this electronically, not a problem. Most of the time, you will sign it electronically. Sometimes you'll sign it, print it out, and have it signed. Surveillance warning: go ahead and let your clients know that when you're going to go look at homes, they're most likely being surveilled, either with cameras or actually being recorded. I remember I had a listing once, and my seller would actually call me and say, "Hey, I don't think those guys like the home." Because they essentially walked in and walked out in 5 minutes, and they said not so nice things about the house. Or she actually even said with the people I think we ended up selling the home to. I actually, I'm not sure. I don't remember, but she was like, I think they really liked the home. It sounded like they really liked the home. And so it was actually with the doorbell ring camera, I think it was, or one of those brands. So you are being surveilled. Keep that in mind whenever you guys go do showings. And I usually recommend, and I let my clients know in this part of the ERTB, that any type of conversation about the home, if you guys are interested in the home, let's have that conversation outside of the house, not inside the house, because they could be listening to us. You just don't know, especially with today's technology. And amendments. So amendments is any addition to the contract or any addition to this agreement. Usually the amendments I give here is, this contract may be canceled anytime if the client is not satisfied with the agent, or if the agent is not satisfied with the client. Sometimes that kind of helps break that barrier where people might not want to commit to 6 months of a relationship or of an agreement, which I completely get, because they don't really know you, you don't really know them, and most of the time they'll sign it anyways, and that kind of like free, get out of jail for free card makes them feel more comfortable with it. So that's the amendment I usually add. This is also the part if you guys wanted to do charge them a fee for like an admin fee or a TC fee. This is where you were at that, and go ahead and explain that to them. But I'm sure you can add all kinds of amendments, but this is the place to do it. It's usually towards the end of it. And that other part, if you guys want to see it, protects everyone involved, right? So final notes. All right, you guys kind of got an idea of how to explain the ERTB. No, not kind of. This is completely how to explain the ERTB, and pretty well in depth. If you guys have a buyer agency agreement, or sorry, have a buyer consult, take this a look. Make sure you guys feel comfortable explaining the ERTB. Let me know if you have any questions about it, and just send me a message. Again, I'm not an attorney, but I'll give you my experiences that I've had, and let's help buyers navigate the process a lot better. I think one of the reasons that we have such a bad reputation as an industry, as a real estate agent industry, is the expectations that we give buyers is so crappy. Sometimes that what I've learned over the years, it's so crappy. Sometimes the expectations that we kind of promise them the world and make things seem so easy, and then you kind of go through the whole process and it's not that at all. Or sometimes you'll tie them up to a contract like this for 6 months, and we go ghost. So let's make sure that we're on top of it. Let's make sure that we're providing A1 service, and let's make sure we're setting the right expectations for our clients. All right, guys, thanks so much for those who watched the whole video. It was a pleasure. I love creating content like this. I really hope you guys get value out of it. And if you guys haven't seen the video on the whole buyer presentation itself, take that a look. If you guys are near the upstate area, let me know, and you're interested in joining a team, let me know. I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. And if you're not in the upstate but would like to stay in relationship, check out Real. Let me know. Reach out to me. Real, I think, is a very interesting brokerage that might make sense to you. All right, guys. Hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you guys later.